Good afternoon. My name is Fred Van Sickle, and I'm Cornell's Vice President for Alumni Affairs and Development, and we welcome all of you. We have hundreds of Cornell leaders, alumni, parents, and friends, and it's a great opportunity to catch up on what's happening at Cornell. Today we're focusing on our endowment, and this is going to be a series of topics over time about issues of real importance to the university. We are really lucky today to have Mike Kolikoff with us. If you don't know Mike, Mike is a distinguished molecular biologist. His laboratories were funded by the National Institutes of Health for 35 years, and he has been an important figure at Cornell for 25 years, first as a faculty member, then a department chair, dean of the College of Veterinary Medicine, and then he served as our longest tenured provost, and now he is our president, and we're very fortunate to have him in this seat. It's a very complicated time, and he's doing a really fabulous job, as you'll see. So before we turn to your questions, we're going to turn to Mike and ask him to just give us an overview on what's happening on campus today.
Thanks, Fred, and my welcomes to everyone as well. I know that topic for today is the endowment. That's going to be our primary focus. I do want to say it's a terrific time to be at Cornell. We just welcomed about 4,000 new freshmen, freshwomen, and transfer students at our convocation. Move-in went well. The weather in Ithaca was terrific, and just wonderful to see all the happy students and happy families. But it's clear from your questions that many of you want to hear about some of the other significant issues that are going on at the university. So before we start talking about the endowment, I want to talk a little bit about some of the elephants in the room, if you will. First, I'll talk a little bit about our federal relations. I want to just caution people that we're seeing a lot of reports in the press. Many of these are inaccurate. Various constituencies are leaking information, either from the government or from other universities. We've tried to be, and I think have been very successful at being very disciplined about what you hear coming out of Cornell. And so the one thing I guess I would urge people is, if you read something and are concerned about it, please don't be concerned unless you've verified it and learned more about it. We have information, of course, on our statements webpage. One can be in touch with Alumni Affairs and Development or University Relations, or write my office directly. But we are seeing a lot of reports, and some of those reports are purposeful leaks to try and influence the situation. So with that, let me turn a little bit to our situation with the federal government. Since this spring, we have been in discussions with the government. I can't really comment much on the negotiations, other than to say, in general, we've been seeking to resolve the situation in which the government has not formally notified us of any restrictions in funding, but in fact, through leaks and tweets, have indicated that Cornell is the target of either stop work orders, or in some cases now we've seen our grants simply not paid, grants that are ongoing, for which we have a contractual obligation to continue the research, and the government has a contractual obligation to pay for that research, but the funds are not being delivered to the university as we bill the government. So that's created a situation in which research grants and contracts covering many, many important areas have been canceled or stop work ordered or not paid. That's research on everything from diabetes to the materials that go into casings for jet engines or jet wings, to cybersecurity, to cancer, agriculture, pediatric cardiac devices, you name it. We've had those grants disrupted, really. We've tried our best to talk to the federal government about those stop work orders or this legally required work, which we're doing to try and resolve this situation. And in general, our effort is to try and get those grants restored. Currently, we're in, as I've said, negotiations with the federal government. We've outlined our conditions or what we think are an appropriate way to resolve cases that the government has with Cornell. Some of these are, we have some existing Office of Civil Rights complaints. We feel that we can resolve those complaints if we talk about them and go through the evidence. But fundamentally, we are not going to violate our principles, and we've outlined our principles at Cornell. First of all, opportunity and access to the university is fundamental for our university. Of course, any person, any study. Secondly, diversity is a driver of our excellence. I do point out to people that is diversity in all dimensions. So it's not just racial, ethnic, and gender diversity, but it's also socioeconomic diversity, diversity of experience. Of course, we've spent a lot of time trying to recruit veterans, other individuals with different kinds of experience to Cornell, which has always been something Cornell has done. Our third principle is merit-based decisions. We make our decisions based on excellence and merit, and that's the fundamental principle that guides our hiring decisions, our admissions decisions, all of our actions at the university. And then finally, of course, we follow the law. We're an institution that follows the law. And we are in negotiations where our effort really is to convince the government that we have followed the law and that we will continue to follow the law, but that we won't really accept the kind of intrusion into our activities that tells us who to admit, who to hire, what we teach, how we teach. That's something we're just not going to do. So that's currently where we are with the federal government. We're still in those conversations. As I say, information has been leaked that we're close to a settlement. I really can't comment on that other than the fact that when we're really close, you'll see that by an agreement that's agreed to by both sides. Secondly, I'd like to talk a little bit about anti-Semitism. It's one of the areas that the government has expressed concern about Cornell, and of course, we're in the midst of a concerning, worsening increase in anti-Semitism nationally. This isn't something that's strictly confined to universities. According to the Anti-Defamation League, anti-Semitic incidents have increased in the U.S. over 300%. And last year was the highest on record, and I'm sure you've all heard of very concerning incidents that have occurred outside of the university. So one of the things that we have done is really double down on making sure that everyone on our campus is welcome. And we have a vibrant Jewish community at Cornell. It's always been a strong part of Cornell. And most recently, we've done surveys of our Jewish students at Cornell. We survey all of our students twice a year, and if we look at the responses of our Jewish students, I was very pleased to see that they have the strongest sense of identity or strongest sense of belonging at Cornell of any of the racial or religious groups at Cornell. Just as an example, prior to October 7th, 2023, the percentage of Jewish students who very strongly or strongly agreed with the statement that they have a strong sense of belonging at Cornell was 78%. And then most recently, this spring, we took that survey again, and it had risen to 80%. 86% of our responding Jewish students stated that they were very satisfied with their feeling of security and safety on campus. So we see that some of the concerns about anti-Semitism on campus, I believe, have been overstated, but we're on our guard to make sure that we continue to make sure that Jewish students, as all of our students, feel a sense of support and community at Cornell. I will say that we have seen that Cornell Jewish students who are asked whether they're rarely or never felt insulted or threatened based on social identity, that that number dropped from 81% to 62%, so a significant drop. That relates to their experiences not specifically at Cornell, so I think is an indication of the current environment and what we're seeing nationally. I was very pleased to see that the ADL recently wrote a letter to Cornell about the progress that we've made on campus and rated us as excellent. You can find that on my website. So doesn't mean there's nothing to do. We still have lots of work to do, but I did want to just express where we are today on that issue. Finally, let me talk a little bit about the issue of DEI on campus, something that we've seen a lot of press about. Cornell does not discriminate. We follow the law. We have processes and procedures in place to make sure that no one is discriminated against. We remain committed to being an institution, as I've said, of any person, any study, and diversity is central to our identity, but diversity in all dimensions. We've done a lot of work to make sure that we are following the law in terms of anti-discrimination law. We have a newly reorganized Cornell Office of Civil Rights, which is a place that oversees this work. They're the body that ensures that we don't discriminate in hiring or admissions. We have resources in place. They are the group where one goes to file bias complaints, and we've recently staffed that up to make sure that those complaints are followed up completely. And they also are the body that investigates those cases of bias as they arise. We have thousands and thousands of searches every year. It's natural to have some complaints about processes not being fully complied with, and we have processes in place where that can be reported and move forward. But I do want to emphasize the primary message here, which is we do not discriminate against anyone, and we make our hiring decisions and admissions decisions based on merit, and we follow the law. So with that, maybe we can move towards our question. Oh, I did see there were questions about our international students, understandably, where we are with international students. I would say that our international population students is absolutely key to Cornell. Our undergraduate population is roughly 10% international students. That has not dropped at all. Our applications from international students, I'm very pleased to see, has not dropped at all. We are concerned a little bit about the difficulty of those students getting visas, and we've done a couple of things to try and make sure, first of all, people apply early for their visas. We've also relaxed the arrival time so that people can arrive late if they need to. And we've also put in place some opportunities for individuals who absolutely can't get here to study in 3 different global areas abroad where they can do some hybrid learning until they can get their visa. So we've been more flexible than usual with these deferrals and our timing, but all of that in support of a critical community for Cornell, and again, a community that enriches us through diversity. So now I just maybe can say a couple of things about the topic of today, and that's our endowment. So I thought I'd give a little bit of a quick overview, high-level overview of our budget. Cornell's budget is about $6.3 billion overall. If we look at the revenue that makes up that $6.3 billion, about a quarter of it, almost a quarter of it, comes from tuition and fees, almost a third of it from the Medical Physicians Organization at our medical school. Research is about 17% of that revenue. Other educational activities, such as Cornell, for example, where Fred and I are sitting today, is about 11%. Cash gifts, that is current use gifts that we get and use in year, are about 12%. And then our endowment provides about 7% of our revenue on an annual basis. That's the payout of our endowment. The endowment income this year was $411 million. And that money from the endowment is used in general for financial aid, research, faculty salaries, and supportive facilities. All of that is, virtually all of that is, are restricted to individual components that make up those categories. And I just point out, if you think about facilities and faculty support, the endowment really lowers the cost of education for everyone. Absent that endowment payout, we wouldn't be able, or we'd need to raise tuition to be able to pay those additional salaries to support those facilities. And then, of course, the financial aid payout from the endowment really ensures any person. It provides us with the additional ability outside of our current use budget to provide that financial aid so that individuals can come on a need-based, need-blind basis, meet full need, and be fully supported at Cornell. The endowment assets at the end of the year were $10.7 billion. And as I've said, the university endowment is made up of something like 8,000 separate individual donor agreements, donor endowments, for a specific purpose that a donor wants to support. It's not a pot of money, unlike what some people think, that can be used as a bank account to cover, for example, federal government not paying for research. We are, by law, restricted from using those funds for things other than what they were restricted for. We can use some of the funds at the margin. Some of that endowment payout pays for the investment office, has paid a little bit of the Alumni Affairs and Development Office, and a little bit for university strategic investments. But that's a capped amount that can be used outside of the use of that it's restricted for, which is by far the predominant amount. So the mission critical priorities that are covered here are about 20% of our endowment is used for professorships directly, 29% for financial aid, about almost 30% for academic programs and research, and general purpose and facilities about 20%. So one point that I do like to make is that sometimes the public sees a number like $10.3 billion and feels that the university is just accumulating wealth and the endowment is growing and growing. In general, we take about 5%, and we've been capped since I started as provost, actually, at 5% total payout. On average, the endowment over time averages something between 7 and 8% of earnings on an annual basis. And if you take the 5% payout and you add on inflation of 2.5%, 3%, you're basically at what the endowment, so you're maintaining the buying value of the endowment and not really gaining that. Where the endowment grows are from new gifts. And of course, we've been very fortunate in our campaign to continue to grow the endowment, but it's not something like a hedge fund that's just accruing value that's not being spent for its mission. Our endowment, $10.3 billion, is a lot of money, of course, but relative to other institutions, particularly given the size of Cornell, we have one of the smallest endowments per student, largely because we're about twice as big or more than almost all of our Ivy peers. That's part of Cornell's tradition. I'm so proud of the fact that we do educate more students on Pell Grants, more students of almost any stripe that you can imagine by far than our peers, simply because of the size of our undergraduate population, which provides opportunities to so many more places. So Cornell ranks 17th in endowment overall, but 65th in endowment per full-time equivalent student. The endowment is a source of strength for our institution. It provides this stable revenue. As I've said, it lowers the cost of education for basically all students, and we're incredibly grateful for our community, the generosity and strength of the Cornell community, and particularly the response to the campaign to do the greatest good. We've raised $5.7 billion so far. About 36.9% of that, $2.1 billion, has been added to the endowment. That's a great, about more than a third of our total funds raised during the campaign has been added to the endowment, which was, I know, a particular goal, Fred, of this campaign, to try and grow the endowment. So with that, I've talked a lot and probably too much, and maybe I'll turn it to Fred for questions.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I want to just acknowledge many of you on the webinar today are actually endowment donors, and we are deeply grateful for those individual commitments and all the things that you help us accomplish, so thank you for that. As you're a very inquisitive group too, we had 215 questions from all of you, so we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but there's lots of overlap. So we've done our best to combine questions, and we'll do our best between now and 4:45 when we conclude. So first question, Mike, is who manages Cornell's endowment investments, and what's the decision-making process?
Yeah, we have an Office of University Investments, which is a staff of about 23 people in New York City. There are three teams there: investments, operations, and risk. And that investment committee is overseen by, that Office of University Investment is overseen by an investment committee of the Board of Trustees, very experienced individuals who guide the endowment and guide the decisions of the endowment. I will say that we've been very, very successful in recent years. Over the last 5 years, our endowment performance has been at or very near the top of all the Ivy institutions. That wasn't always the case, where the endowment is managed by a group of really professional individuals. It's based in New York City, and they think of all the issues around diversifying risk, having substantial flexibility to take advantage of opportunities, et cetera.
Great. I think you might just talk a little bit about the strategy, not that you're an investment manager, but I mean,
yeah,
the general strategy that's used for the endowment.
Yeah, the general idea, of course, is to maximize the return of endowment. And of course, they use managers, external managers, and vary that so and a lot of this is beyond me. I sit in these meetings with alphas and betas, and I sort of get a headache. But the fundamental strategy is to make sure that we are diversified enough so that we can handle risk in the long term while trying to, as I say, maximize our overall return. So we use stocks, bonds, private equity, hedge funds, real estate, resource-related investments, all of the sort of diversified portfolio, and try to get the most value in terms of managers that we can possibly get, and the most diversity so that if the unknown happens, we're protected as a university overall. I will also say that we're conservative about our payout in the sense that 5% payout is averaged backwards in the previous 28 quarters of endowment performance. So we're modest in terms of our payout pool.
And maybe just talking a little bit more about how the strategy has changed in recent years that's generated this incredible improvement in results.
Yeah, I think in general, what Ken Miranda, our Chief Investment Officer, has done has taken a number of steps to strengthen the endowment performance. First of all, he restructured the endowment substantially, the portfolio, reducing the total number of accounts, reducing the managers. He moved us out of a lot of illiquid investments that had us locked for many years. So we have liquidity across several asset classes, and then reduced also the unfunded commitments that we had in many areas. So all of this was followed a strategic evaluation of the portfolio to try and improve, drive down managers' fees, improve reporting and analytics, hire the best young minds. Many of those graduating from Cornell go in and intern and work at the investment office. And so as an example of this, since June 2016, our 13 asset classes have been reduced to 8, and the manager fees have been reduced by between $25 and $40 million annually. So really better performance at a lower cost.
What proportion of the general endowment is available to respond to fiscal emergencies like we are experiencing with cuts in federal funding?
Yeah, we receive this question a lot because people think that the endowment 10.3 is, as I say, a kind of bank account that we can pull from. And there is no general endowment. Now we have some of those 8,000 funds are, university support. So there are some supports that come directly and are unrestricted in that way. But we can't just pull money from the endowment. When we do take an additional draw, and so, for example, after the 2008 downturn, there was a period of time where, and beyond the 5% that I've described was taken, that's a draw from every one of those accounts. It's limited in terms of how much one can take there. And of course, we're careful that we're restricted in that way, in that we don't want to degrade the value of those individual accounts long term. So we're really restricted in doing that. We've done it in a couple of emergency situations. Certainly for universities like Cornell, we're not completely restricted from doing that, but we're highly constrained to make sure, both by law and by our own guiding principles, to make sure that we respect those individual accounts and those restricted gifts.
So how does the new law on endowment taxation affect us specifically? We've heard lots about that in recent months.
Yeah, so Fred is referring to the endowment tax that took a lot of ups and downs there. We have had a 1.4% endowment tax up until this Congress, and that Cornell was just below the threshold of that endowment tax. As I've said, the endowment tax is endowment per student, so there's we were just below the endowment per student threshold. And then the discussions were everything to take that endowment tax to 30% or 21%. What passed was a more modest increase in that endowment, but significant on a tiered basis. Cornell still, and what was at one point in play was that the per student basis would only be domestic students and not international students. If that had been the case, Cornell would have tipped just over and seen the lowest threshold, 1.4% endowment tax. However, that was ruled out by the Senate parliamentarian. And so what we have is still Cornell's threshold this year is below. We believe next year will be below. So for probably 2 years, we will not be subject to the endowment tax. But if you're successful, if the endowment continues to grow, we don't plan to grow our students by a significant amount. And while there's some other things that we can do to try and make sure that we're as protected as possible, it's likely at some point we'll see this 1.4% tax.
So tell us what the university...
And I should say, I'm
Sure.
sorry, Fred, just to be clear to everyone, that 1.4% is 1.4% of the payout, not 1.4% of the endowment itself.
Good distinction. So in light of all this, what's Cornell doing to ensure our long-term financial sustainability in light of many threats on many fronts?
Yeah, we are seeing many threats, as you know. Some of this is our growth post-COVID, where we've really grown substantially since 2021. Our staff has grown, our total staff has grown about 20%. And that has been a growth, understandable. There's a lot of sort of federal regulations and other things that have occurred that explains that, but it really is an unsustainable level of growth. And it puts a lot of pressure on all the college budgets, all the university budget. So that pressure, the federal pressures that I've described, the inflationary pressures that we're seeing, legal pressures associated with a number of major lawsuits across the university have all combined to put a lot of pressure on the university. And in addition, of course, endowment tax at some point, and this, what we're anticipating are reductions in federal spending going forward, particularly in research and NSF budgets and others. All of this has made us think about how in this moment we need to develop financial flexibility and be serious about tightening our budget and controlling our spend. So we have a plan that includes short-term immediate reductions in units, and we've had a lot of conversations around the university about this, and I'm really pleased to see a really strong response by the deans and vice presidents and vice provosts in terms of pulling in their budgets. We're also looking at restructuring what we call financial reengineering a little bit. One of the things we're anticipating is new computer systems. Our major systems at the university are really at their lifespan. Excuse me. And we need to reinvest. We need to reinvest in a way in which we're all using the same system. We use different systems across campus, across our campuses, and even on the Ithaca campus, you'll see implementations of the same system customized for, and it's created a lot of duplication, a lot of inefficiency. So we're going to be systematically redoing our new systems. And that's also an opportunity to think about our processes. One of the things that's wonderful about Cornell is the fact that we have so many terrific colleges, all with a unique culture, et cetera. But when we duplicate HR, IT, communications, finance in every college, and every college builds its own unit, there is built-in efficiency. So one of the things we've been talking about is a real careful look by vice presidents across the entire university and across our campuses to try and really use technology, use AI if we can, and try and eliminate some of this duplication, and try and get us all. And the mantra here is as common as possible, as different as absolutely necessary. And so we're going to try and incentivize everybody to do things as much as similarly as others as possible, which will save us a lot of money.
So tell us, what kind of cash reserves does Cornell have at a time like this to respond to emergency needs?
Cornell has substantial cash reserves. We, across the university, make sure our CFO in coordination with our finance committee at the board, looks at our cash reserves and our cash position, looks at our debt position constantly, thinks about how we make sure that our assets to debt ratio is appropriate, that we have the cash to handle an emergency, and if we feel like we're stretched there, that we have the borrowing capacity to be able to immediately respond to an emergency. I will say it's one of the things in 2007, 2008 that was difficult for the university because we found ourselves at a real cash shortfall. We really didn't have the liquidity that allowed us the flexibility, for example, on the endowment to be able to go back into the market at its low point or take advantage of the opportunity. And we found ourselves borrowing at a difficult time. So that was a lesson for the university, and I think we've had a lot of fiscal prudence since that time.
So tell us about our strategy for addressing research funding shortfalls in response to federal changes.
Yeah, we've been really supporting a lot of research. Of course, we can't do everything, but critical areas of research, for example, those grants that are funded for which we're contractually obligated to do the research and are not being paid, we are simply supporting that research. We're not telling the investigators to stop doing research, but we are talking to the federal government about the bills that are due. And that is an ongoing conversation. I don't want to say too much more about that. But we've also stepped in and supported personnel, equipment, mouse colonies. I'm an individual that had did mouse genetics, did significant mouse colonies for a long period of time. Of course, if you lose money and you have to eliminate or not be able to support those precious research resources that you've developed over years, it's devastating to careers. So we're stepping in where we need to try and support our faculty.
So, Mike, if a decision is made to pay a fine to the federal government, where will that money come from? Would it be the endowment?
No, most likely it will not be from the endowment. Now, excuse me, if the endowment tax would most likely come from the endowment.
Right.
But any fine paid to the government, if that's where we end up, first of all, it may not be a fine to the federal government, as we've seen in some of the settlements. Some of those settlements, and we would certainly try to achieve this, are investments where we could make investments in our own mission important goals, and rather than just pay a penalty to the federal government. But that would have to come from general resources at the university that we have. Some are reserves, some perhaps borrowing. I expect any settlement like that would be over time anyway. So, but I'm hopeful that we can come out of this appropriately achieving an end where we convince the government that we're obeying the law, and there hasn't been demonstrated any specific issue, and that any fine that's demanded or any payment it recognizes those facts.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time. You've been really good. We have maybe time for a couple of minutes for one more question, and this is one that we hear on occasion. Can you talk to reports of funding that Cornell receives from the government of Qatar, and then how does this funding affect the university?
Yeah, thank you. So I was recently over in Qatar for the graduation of our medical students. Some time ago, I think it's almost 2 decades ago, the university, particularly the medical school, developed a program in Qatar, a medical training program in Qatar, that is an extraordinary success in that region. It trains physicians. It's trained many, many physicians for the region. They graduate at the highest level. They perform the highest level. A very significant percentage of that class is women because they prefer to stay in country than going out of country to a foreign medical school. And virtually all of the money that the university gets from Qatar goes to supporting that medical school. There's a small amount that goes to support the College of Medicine that supports research that's done in concert between the two entities and supports the costs of the medical school putting on that medical school program. But virtually everything else stays, 95%, 98% stays in Qatar. What we've seen is reports that and of course when you list foreign investment, Cornell appears near the top because that medical school is an expensive enterprise. But as I say, it almost all stays in Qatar. And these reports that suggest that money is coming to Ithaca to fund faculty that teach Middle East studies and teach it in a way that supports the Arab interests or any other interests that somehow distorts our education are absolutely 100% false. We have a very balanced Middle East department, outstanding faculty that have been teaching for many, many years. None of that money goes to any place near that faculty. Of course, we have a very robust Jewish studies program within our Near Eastern Studies department. So I just, again, it's one of those things, please don't believe what you're reading unless you verified it.
Great. Well, we're at the end of our time. Mike, thank you very much for your time, and thank you to our audience for their time. We're super grateful. We know these are hard times for higher education, but Cornell is moving on. It's a great thing to have your support in so many ways.
Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. Really enjoyed it.